Lightning split the sky in a jagged blaze, revealing the woman crouched in the mud, her eyes fierce with determination. Blood trickled down her cheek, her breath ragged. In that flash of violent brilliance, death loomed closer than the relentless thunder overhead. Yet she refused to bow, even if the frontier itself demanded she surrender. A sprawling frontier of raw promise and savage peril stretched beneath the vast bowl of the sky. Dry winds howled across the high plains, carrying the tang of pine from distant mountains. Wyoming's newly carved trails offered opportunities for settlers brave enough to stake their claims, and for desperados hungry for easy prey. On the outskirts of a trading post known as Red Creek Junction stood a tattered clapboard shack with windows rattling in the relentless gusts. Inside the shack, Charlotte Bellard, known simply as Lottie to the few who cared to know her, wrestled with the handle of a battered trunk. One last turn, and the worn metal lock snapped shut. Lottie was only 25, but carried herself with a gravity that suggested a longer, harsher life. Her father had died in the Civil War a decade prior, leaving her an orphan in the charge of a distant aunt. That aunt passed last winter, succumbing to fever. Now all Lottie possessed were a few memories, the trunk of meager belongings, and a letter that urged her to claim land once promised to her father in a remote corner of Wyoming. She intended to build a new life there, a dream overshadowed by the knowledge that if she failed, she might not live to see another spring. Her goal was painfully simple: survive in a land that had shown her only cruelty and loneliness thus far. Her fear was just as stark, being unworthy of her father's legacy and losing what little she had left of him. She reached for a battered cavalry issue canteen. She had snatched it from her father's possession years ago, a single token from the battlefield where he'd fallen. Its surface was worn smooth by countless nights of her anxious fingers tracing letters and dents. That canteen was her last tether to the man who'd once cradled her on his knee, spinning stories of wide, open prairies and a ranch that would be theirs. Outside, the wind hammered against thin walls. Horses whinnied in the dusty corral behind the shack, and the smell of impending rain mingled with the tang of horse sweat. Rain was a blessing in a territory so often parched, but tonight it felt ominous. Pushing a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear, Lottie set her trunk down. A shadow passed the window, a tall figure leaning against the corral fence. The figure was Thomas Hardin, a lean man with pale eyes that had seen more death than dawns. Once a Union soldier, later a gun for hire, Hardin had drifted west under the burden of regrets he spoke of only in guarded half-truths. A double holster anchored to his hips told stories of its own. He had lost count of how many men he'd faced down, but every life taken seemed to corrode his soul. He appeared calm, almost statuesque, as he looked out over the jagged horizon. Hardin's goal was redemption, though he might never admit it aloud. He had spent years wandering from place to place, searching for a glimmer of salvation or purpose in dusty towns and backwater saloons. His fear was that redemption might be out of his grasp, that the lives he'd ended had condemned him to a fate no lesser than the men he had once hunted. Thomas had come to Red Creek Junction lured by rumors of a bounty on a notorious outlaw gang. He'd arrived only to learn that the lead outlaw, a man named Cole McCready, had vanished into the wilderness. Work was scarce, rumors contradictory. He was down to his last dollar when he first saw Lottie entering the ramshackle cabin to pay for lodging. Something in her demeanor caught his attention, an earnest stubbornness. When she asked about hiring a guide to help her find a place called Willow Creek Meadows, Hardin offered. Whatever his failings, he knew the territory better than most. He might find some dignity in assisting a young woman who was clearly alone. At first, Lottie refused. She did not trust men who wore guns with such ease, but the barkeep at Red Creek Saloon told her straight, "Missy, you can't go out there alone. He's a decent shot, even if he's got the devil in his stare." She needed safe passage, Hardin needed the money. A fragile alliance was born. That evening, they gathered in the cramped shack as rain battered the roof. Lightning flared, revealing the harsh lines carved into Hardin's face. a living roadmap of regrets. Lottie sensed a looming danger in that scowl, yet she also felt a flicker of empathy. They both struggled to hold onto something intangible. Hope, maybe. Lightning crashed again, shaking the timbers. Hardin tipped his hat back and spoke. "We leave at dawn. If we time it right, we'll reach Willow Creek Meadows in 5-6 days." His voice was low, sandpaper rough, but not unkind. Lottie met his gaze. "And I'll pay you $5. It's all I have. Take it or leave it." Hardin ran a hand through his dust-colored hair and let out a dry laugh. $5 plus a hot meal each night, and a place to rest come day's end. Her eyes flicked to the gun at his side. "That's it. Deal." A pact was struck. They might have been two ghosts passing in the night. Neither realized how tightly fate would entwine their destinies in the coming days. Neither anticipated the heartbreak, betrayal, and mercy that the frontier would soon demand from them, both in blood and in spirit. And outside, the night whispered with an unsettling hush, as if it too trembled at the trials that awaited them. The rain let up sometime after midnight, leaving the world cool and hushed. Lottie couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, gazing at the shimmering puddles in the moonlight. A faint silver glow fell on her trunk and the canteen resting atop it. She found her thoughts wandering to her father. He had enlisted when she was a child, returning only once on leave. She remembered his laugh, a rich, warm sound that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. By the time news came that he'd fallen in battle, she was old enough to grasp the finality but still too young to accept the loss. Her mother died soon after, her spirit eroded by grief. Lottie's aunt had done her best, but with meager resources. Life had taught Lottie how easily everything could be taken away. Now, with dawn approaching, she felt a twinge of excitement battling her fear. The frontier beckoned, both a promise and a threat. If she could build a homestead at Willow Creek Meadows, she might carve out the life her father had dreamed of. Still, the possibility of failure pressed on her chest like a stone. Outside, beneath the open sky, Hardin was likewise restless. Seated on an upturned bucket near a dying campfire, he stared into the embers. In the orange glow, he seemed haunted by some faraway memory. His mouth twisted in a grimace, as though recalling a moment of unimaginable regret. More than once, his hand drifted to the pistol at his side, his security blanket against a menacing darkness the fire could not dispel. Before dawn, a rider galloped into Red Creek Junction, a lawman from a neighboring territory, bone-tired and wounded. He stumbled into the trading post saloon, breath reeking of desperation. Hardin, fetching coffee, glanced up as the lawman half collapsed against the bar. "Help! Cole McCready's gang. Shoot out near Painted Rock Canyon," he gasped. "They took my horse, killed 2 men. The rest of us scattered." Lottie, startled awake by the commotion, caught wind of the conversation. McCready's gang outlaws rumored to have no mercy. She heard Hardin curse under his breath. The barkeep pressed for details. The lawman didn't have much more to give. They're heading west, deeper into Wyoming territory. They're like wolves on a scent. Hardin turned toward Lottie, expression grim. "We'd best hurry if we aim to beat them to the pass, or else we risk crossing paths with McCready." Lottie's stomach lurched. She'd grown up on tales of outlaws and bloodshed, but the fear felt different now that she stood on the threshold of her own journey. Still, she nodded. "Let's leave at first light." No more words were exchanged. Fear roiled in her gut, but she swallowed it down. Hardin's jaw set in a tight line. He led her to the horse he had procured, an older chestnut mare with kind eyes. Lottie loaded her trunk, canteen, and a handful of supplies. The rain had cleared, though swirling clouds still threatened another storm on the horizon. They set out. As the sun rose, the landscape spread before them in a patchwork of sagebrush, rolling hills and distant rocky outcrops. The clouds glowed pale pink, shifting to gold as the morning matured. In the crisp air, every scent was sharper, the pungent aroma of sage, the dust churned up by hooves, the metallic hint of the canteen at Lottie's side. Her chest felt both tight and liberated. She had never traveled so far from any semblance of civilization. Each mile took her deeper into uncertainty. The harness creaked with every lurch of the horse. Hardin rode slightly ahead, scanning for signs of trouble. By noon, they paused at a shallow creek to water the horses. Lottie dismounted, her thighs aching from the unfamiliar ride, and refilled her canteen. Cold water spilled over her fingers, a small reminder of nature's mercy. Hardin stood nearby, distant as a lone hawk perched on a fence post. She glanced at him, wanting to bridge the silence, but words failed her. She recognized in him a kind of perpetual wariness, as if he expected a bullet from any corner. They ate a meager lunch of jerky and hardtack. Lottie forced down each bite, focusing on the necessity of nourishment. In the recesses of her mind, she couldn't shake the image of Cole McCready's gang, faceless men with loaded guns. She asked timidly, "Who is Cole McCready?" Hardin exhaled, leaning against a rocky ledge. "Devil in human skin. He's robbed stagecoaches, banks, ranchers, leaves a trail of bodies behind him. Some folks say he's come to Wyoming because it's the last place the law might not chase him. There's a bounty on his head, but capturing him is near impossible. No soul who's come close lived to speak of it." The tension in Lottie's jaw returned. She thought of her father, who might have faced men like McCready once upon a time. "Let's hope we never see him." Hardin only grunted, a noncommittal sound. They remounted and pressed on. They made camp near an old cottonwood tree at the base of low, rising hills. Storm clouds lurked on the horizon like bruises on the sky. The air turned thick with that electric tang which forewarns thunder. Hardin gathered kindling, while Lottie unpacked her bedroll. Neither spoke much. Their partnership was one of necessity, not friendship. Yet each fleeting glance hinted at a silent camaraderie in the face of the wilderness. A coyote howled in the distance, a lonely cry drifting on the wind. She felt the day's fatigue pressing on her bones. After supper, a bland stew of dried beans. She drew close to the flickering flames. The crackle of the fire was the only comfort. Hardin stared into the darkness, pistol in hand. Finally, he said quietly, "If McCready's heading west, we may need to detour. Safer route might cost us 2 extra days." Lottie swallowed. 2 days more out in the wild. She had little choice. "Then we take it," she said firmly. "If it keeps us breathing." Hardin nodded. A hint of relief passed through his eyes. Maybe he expected her to object. She lay down soon after, exhaustion weighing heavily. Sleep came uneasily, haunted by flickering dreams of outlaws, a man's silhouette in lightning, and the echo of a father's voice urging her onward. They departed at dawn, heading south to skirt around rumored outlaws. By late afternoon, the terrain changed. Rugged canyons replaced rolling hills, and the wind funneled through narrow passes. Hardin grew tense, scanning every shadow. Then disaster as they rounded a bend, a shot cracked. Pebbles skittered from the canyon wall as a bullet ricocheted. Hardin cursed, yanking Lottie from her horse. They took cover behind boulders, hearts pounding. "Hand over your valuables!" A voice shouted from above. A spindly figure peered over the ledge, bandit, desperate, or perhaps just cruel. Lottie dared a glance. A second shot cracked. Gunpowder stung the air. Hardin's lips peeled back in a silent snarl. "Stay low," he hissed to Lottie. With swift composure, he popped up, aimed, and fired twice. The bandit flailed, wounded or worse, disappearing behind the ledge with a ragged cry. Silence fell, broken by the distant echo of gunshots bouncing across the canyon. Lottie's pulse hammered in her ears. Hardin motioned for her to stay put while he scrambled up the rocky slope, checking for more ambushers. After a tense minute, he returned, looking grim. "He's gone," Hardin muttered. "Dead? Maybe. But no sign of others." He paused, glancing at Lottie. "You all right?" She realized her hands trembled. Grit stung her palms where she'd landed. Nodding, she exhaled slowly. The raw violence of it all hit her. A man shot, his life snuffed in an instant, but the frontier allowed little time for mourning. They hastily gathered themselves and rode on with caution. Her mind spun. Hardin had killed before, she knew, but seeing it happen so abruptly shook her. A relentless question, now why would she also be forced to kill if it meant surviving? The route Hardin chose led them up a winding mountain path, away from canyons that harbored outlaws. The air grew thinner, the horses labored. Clouds hung low, pressing down like a somber shroud. Occasional drizzles turned the trail to slick mud, slowing progress to a crawl. Lottie's limbs ached, her spirits flagging. The gunfight haunted her thoughts. She pictured the bandit's face, twisted in surprise and pain. She felt the frontier's silent question, "What are you willing to do to stay alive?" She caught herself absently running her thumb over the canteen. Her father had chosen to fight in a war, presumably to protect the Union, but had that choice doomed him? Hardin's mood darkened as well. He rode in silence, occasionally casting worried glances at the sky. Finally, they made camp in a narrow valley, building a small fire beneath a slab of stone to shelter the flames from rain. That night, thunder rumbled in the distance. The world felt on edge, the hush before a storm. Lottie and Hardin shared a few words about the trail. She studied his face in the firelight, lines etched with regret or sorrow. She ventured a question, "Were you ever afraid?" "In the war." Hardin's brow tightened. "Yeah," he said finally. "I was young, thought I knew what fear was. Didn't realize true fear is surviving what others don't." His voice was quiet, nearly lost beneath the growing wind. The words pierced her. She wondered if that was the same truth her father took to his grave. No more questions rose to her lips. They retreated to their separate bedrolls, lulled to fitful sleep by thunder's low growl. Morning broke in a downpour. Rain lashed the ground, turning trails into rivers of mud. They pressed on water streaming off their oilskin coats. Visibility dropped to mere yards. Lightning flared, thunder cracked overhead. By midday, they found themselves on a ragged plateau overlooking a valley choked with storm clouds. Hardin reined in his horse. "We can't push much further," he shouted over the wind. "We need shelter." Lottie peered through the sheets of rain. She could barely see. "What about that ridge?" She yelled back, pointing toward a rock overhang. They urged their horses forward. The wind stung their faces. Then, abruptly, 3 figures materialized out of the storm. Men on horseback, drenched and grim. In the center was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek, Cole Macready. Hardin froze, hand drifting to his revolver. Lottie's stomach knotted. She had never met Macready, but she knew instantly who he was. This was a man molded by violence, predatory eyes flicking from Hardin to Lottie. "Thomas Hardin," Macready said, voice muffled by the storm's roar. "I heard you were after me once? Bounty, was it?" He smirked, teeth gleaming. His 2 men spread out, forming a silent half-circle. Hardin's face was stone. "Wasn't personal," he shouted over the wind. "Funny thing about personal." Macready returned, flicking water from his hat. "Isn't that what you said before you gunned down my baby brother in Texas last spring?" His smile vanished, replaced by cold fury. "That felt personal to me." Lottie felt her pulse thunder in her ears. Hardin's breath rasped the tension raw. She could almost taste fear mingling with the storm-churned air. Macready's men aimed rifles. "Toss your guns," Macready ordered. "We can discuss justice." Hardin's shoulders tensed. Slowly, he disarmed, tossing his revolver into the mud. Lottie followed, although her own weapon was only a small derringer she'd barely practiced with. A sick feeling churned in her gut. Macready dismounted, boots splashing in the mud. He regarded Hardin with icy contempt. "I should shoot you where you stand." Then his gaze slid to Lottie. "But maybe there's a trade to be made. I hear Hardin's worth a decent price to certain folks. Rivals, lawmen, doesn't matter. Might make sense to keep him alive until I can auction him off." He shifted closer to Lottie. "You traveling with him, or is he forcing you along?" She swallowed hard. "I hired him to guide me." Macready's lips curled in a predatory sneer. "Well, little lady, consider yourself free of that burden." Then, to Hardin, "You come with us?" Lottie's mind spun in a frenzy. She had no illusions what Macready did to people who fell into his hands. Guilt swarmed her. Was it worth trying to save Hardin? He was a killer, he admitted as much. Yet she owed him her life for protecting her on this journey. Could she abandon him? She made her choice in a heartbeat. Heart pounding, she lunged for Hardin's revolver in the mud. One of Macready's men shouted a warning. A shot cracked. Pain seared Lottie's shoulder as a bullet grazed her flesh. She hit the ground, revolver clenched in her trembling hand. Time slowed. She aimed, fired blindly. The recoil wrenched her wrist. Thunder seemed to roar in unison with her shot. Macready's second man jerked back, struck in the leg, crashing to the ground. Hardin seized the distraction. He tackled Macready, grappling in the swirling mud. The outlaw's gun spat, but the shot went wild. Struggling, Hardin landed a savage blow to Macready's jaw. A crack of lightning illuminated the scene in stark clarity. Lottie scrambling, her shoulder bleeding. Hardin wrestling with the towering form of Cole Macready, the other outlaw trying to reload his rifle in the deluge. A sudden wave of terror flooded Lottie. She couldn't think, only act. She aimed again, but Hardin and Macready were rolling together, mud slick and writhing. Then a deafening crack. Hardin's revolver, still in Lottie's grip, clicked empty. She fumbled for the derringer inside her coat. Another shot from the outlaw's rifle rang out, clipping a rock near her. Shards stung her face. Hardin managed to gain the upper hand, smashing Macready's head against the ground. The outlaw slumped, dazed. For a split second, Hardin staggered to his feet, searching for a loaded gun. The surviving henchman took aim at Hardin's back. Lottie's scream tore through the storm as she fired the derringer. The bullet struck the outlaw's shoulder. He howled and dropped his rifle. Hardin whipped around, eyes wide. Without hesitation, he grabbed the fallen rifle, turned it on the wounded man, and pulled the trigger. Blood sprayed across the mud. Silence reigned, broken only by thunder and Lottie's ragged sobs. Hardin stood, chest heaving, rifle barrel smoking in the rain. Macready, unconscious or maybe dead, lay sprawled in the muck. Lottie pressed a hand to her shoulder, hot blood pulsing through her fingers. The storm battered them, as if the heavens themselves raged at the violence below. Darkness descended. The thunderstorm grew fiercer. Hardin dragged Macready's limp form beneath the overhang, searching for any sign of life. Macready groaned, a battered but still living shell. Lottie huddled nearby, pain radiating from her wounded shoulder. Hardin glared down at the man. "He's alive, but not by much," he muttered. Rainwater dripped from his hat, mingling with blood on the ground. A savage part of him wanted to end Macready here and now, exact the final vengeance. Yet something inside him recoiled from murder in cold blood. He turned to Lottie, whose face was pale from shock and blood loss. "We need to stop that bleeding," he said gently. "Let me see." She nodded, eyes clouded with pain. Hardin tore a strip of cloth from Macready's own shirt, binding Lottie's shoulder. He worked with surprising tenderness. Macready stirred, groaning. Hardin stood over him, rifle in hand. The next moments felt suspended in time. Hardin had spent years chasing men like Macready, even dreaming of capturing or killing him for the bounty. Here was his chance, but an unsettling thought crept in. Would killing him now save more lives, or just damn Hardin's soul further? His eyes flicked to Lottie, trembling and near fainting from blood loss, but valiantly holding on. This woman had risked her life for him only minutes ago, defying Macready with fearless resolve. Hardin's battered moral code flickered, urging him to be more than a killer. "I'm taking him in," Hardin announced at last, voice hoarse. "He faces the law, not my bullet." Lottie nodded weakly. She didn't have the strength to argue, even if she disagreed. "I just want to live," she murmured. Hardin bent down, rummaging through Macready's jacket until he found a length of rope. He bound the outlaw's wrists and ankles. Then, with no small effort, he dragged the unconscious man beneath a rock ledge. Rain hammered down, wind lashing the plateau. Lottie slumped against a boulder, teeth chattering from shock and cold. Hardin crouched beside her, remorse flickering in his eyes. "We'll make it," he promised, though he wasn't entirely sure. Shelter was minimal. The horses had scattered in the chaos, though maybe they lingered somewhere nearby. Night loomed black and merciless. They were far from any settlement, pinned down by the storm with an injured captive, and an injured woman. Hardin realized only one course of action might keep Lottie alive. She needed proper shelter and medical attention to treat the wound. If they waited out the night in the storm, she might develop fever or infection. The nearest outpost or town was nearly 2 days' ride, but with the weather and no horses in immediate reach, traveling was next to impossible. Then he noticed a faint orange glow flickering in the distance. A cabin, perhaps? Light glinted in the swirling sheets of rain, perched on the far edge of the plateau. His heart surged. If it was a cabin, maybe they could find refuge there. But how to get there with Lottie and a bound outlaw? Hardin's own body felt ready to collapse. He was no doctor, and lugging McCready through the mud was dangerous. A new dread seized him. If I leave McCready behind, he might escape or die. If Hardin delivered McCready to the law, it could be his final redemption. But if Lottie died, any redemption would be meaningless. He turned to her, breath ragged. "I see a cabin. I'll carry you there. Then I'll come back for McCready if I can." Lottie managed a faint nod, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. "Do it," she whispered. "Let him rot in the storm if it comes to that." Hardin's throat tightened. Taking a deep breath, he gathered Lottie into his arms. She gasped in pain, but didn't resist. Straining every muscle, he began trudging through the downpour toward the distant glow. The mud sucked at his boots, lightning illuminated the plateau in brilliant staccato flashes. Behind them, Cole McCready lay tied and unconscious, battered by wind and rain. Hardin's arms trembled with the effort of carrying Lottie, yet the memory of her risking her life for his sake steeled him. He fought each step, ignoring the biting wind. The cabin's light drew closer, a beacon of fragile hope. Reaching the cabin felt like staggering into a dream. Hardin shoved the door open, half collapsing inside with Lottie. The interior was sparse, a single room with a rickety table, a cold hearth, and a straw mattress. A small stove glimmered with dying embers, the source of the light that had guided him. No one was inside. It might be a trapper's cabin or an abandoned prospector's shelter. Hardin wasted no time. He eased Lottie onto the mattress. She winced, hissing with pain. Quickly, he stoked the embers to life, feeding small bits of kindling until a meager flame flickered. The warmth was immediate relief. He turned to Lottie's wound, carefully removing the soaked bandage. Blood still seeped, but less profusely. He found a jar of whiskey on a shelf, blessedly sealed. With apologetic eyes, he poured the liquor over her wound. She gasped, tears burning as she bit down on a rag to stifle her screams. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice cracking. He used a clean scrap of cloth from a trunk in the corner to bind her shoulder again. The whiskey might stave off infection. He prayed it would. She clutched his arm, nails digging into his flesh. Then she slumped, exhaustion overtaking her. For a moment, Hardin just knelt by her side, letting his breath slow. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The storm raged outside, furious wind rattling the shutters. A new dread uncoiled in his stomach. McCready. He was still out there. The man might die or break free. Hardin owed it to his own battered conscience to see justice done, but the thought of leaving Lottie alone made him hesitate. He glanced to the door, jaw set. Then he rose. "I'll come back," he murmured to Lottie's unconscious form, voice tight. "I'll come back." He stepped outside into the tempest. It took nearly an hour of searching the plateau by lantern light, calling on every ounce of Hardin's strength to find the spot where he had left McCready. The storm had calmed slightly, though rain still slanted in gusts. Lightning flickered further off in the sky. When Hardin reached the overhang, McCready was gone, no body, no ropes. Panic spiked through him. His lantern's glow lit the churned mud. Drag marks led away, as if someone had crawled. Hardin followed the trail around a massive boulder and froze. Cole McCready slumped against the rock, ropes still around his ankles but severed at his wrists. He glared up at Hardin with murder in his eyes, a revolver trembling in his bloody hand. Possibly a spare gun from one of his dead men. Hardin's stomach flipped. The barrel was aimed straight at him. "Suppose you came back to finish the job?" Macready growled, voice rough from cold and pain. Hardin slowly raised his arms, revolver still holstered. His mind whirled. Could he outdraw Macready in this condition? A misstep would earn him a bullet. "You could have run?" Hardin said quietly. Macready spat blood. "I can't run far with this busted leg. Figured I'd wait, see if you'd come back. Knew I'd do gooder like you'd not leave me to die." Hardin's jaw clenched, frustration mingling with pity. "I ain't letting you loose," he declared. "You face the law, or I'll put you down." Macready's laughter was hollow, edged with despair. "Law? You think the law matters out here? We're both killers. Just you hide behind that moral high ground." Thunder rumbled. They stared at each other, two silhouettes in the flickering lantern glow. Macready's knuckles whitened around the gun. Hardin saw the faintest tremor, blood loss likely. He decided to risk it. He drew. Macready fired. The shot grazed Hardin's side, searing a path of agony. Hardin gritted his teeth, pulling his trigger. The bullet slammed into Macready's shoulder. He cried out, the revolver clattering from his grasp. Hardin, panting, pressed a hand to his bleeding side. For a moment, the night stilled. He advanced on Macready, gun trained on the man's chest. A part of Hardin, the old bounty hunter, wanted to squeeze the trigger and end it. But something greater, born of Lottie's desperate courage, pulled him back from that edge. Instead, Hardin knelt and grabbed the rope. He tied Macready's wrists, ignoring the outlaw's curses. "You want to call me a killer? Fine," Hardin said through clenched teeth. "But I ain't an executioner." "Not anymore?" Macready glared, chest heaving in a mixture of fury and resignation. Hardin propped him up against the rock, scanning the horizon. The horses were nowhere in sight, but a dragging blow on Hardin's torso reminded him that time was short. Between his own wound, Macready's injuries, and Lottie's condition, they all teetered on the brink. At length, Hardin hoisted Macready over his shoulder. The pain in his side flared, but he forced himself forward. Step by painstaking step, he trudged back to the cabin. Each footfall was an agony. The night was black as pitch. Rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the wind's chill sank into his bones. He reached the cabin near dawn, muscles aflame, side throbbing, half carrying, half dragging the wounded outlaw. Inside, he dropped Macready heavily on the floor. Lottie startled awake with a soft cry. She blinked in confusion, her face pale. Hardin collapsed to his knees. "He's not dying out there," he mumbled. "Nor are we." He pressed a hand to his side, feeling hot wetness. The bullet graze had opened a deep cut, but maybe not fatal. Lottie, tears in her eyes, offered what help she could, rummaging for any cloth or whiskey to patch him up. Sunrise filtered through cracks in the shutter. The storm clouds parted, revealing a golden, exhausted dawn. In that fragile light, 3 battered souls lay scattered across a trapper's cabin floor. One near death from infection, one from blood loss, the third from pain and hatred. But none of them would die alone. A week later, Lottie Bellard sat on the rickety porch of Willow Creek Meadows' newly built cabin, her wounded shoulder bandaged but healing. She gazed across the small valley, where the creek wound lazily through green fields flecked with wildflowers. Despite the hardships, they'd made it. Hardin emerged from behind the cabin, carrying a plank of fresh, cut wood. He walked with a limp, side still tender, but determination lit his eyes. The local law had taken Cole Macready into custody 3 days ago after Hardin ferried him to a nearby outpost. His bounty wouldn't make Hardin rich, but it might stake him to a start, a chance at honest work. Macready had survived, though he faced a hangman's noose or a long prison sentence. The hush of the meadows was restful, almost unnaturally calm after the storm and gunfire. Lottie's chest felt heavy with gratitude and lingering grief. She had left behind blood and danger, but carried forward a quiet resolve. She was alive. She had the land to call her own, a dream waiting to be fulfilled. And Hardin, an unlikely ally, remained by her side, though for how long was anyone's guess. He caught her eye, gave a small nod. No words were needed. She smiled, a trembling but genuine gesture, then looked again at the wide blue sky. She felt her father's presence in the rustle of the grass, in the creek's gentle murmur. Here, perhaps, she could honor him by living a life of courage and compassion. Hardin set the plank by the cabin wall, flexing his shoulder with a grimace. "Well, finish your roof by sundown," he said. "Then I'll see if those traps I set this morning caught anything." She nodded. "I'd appreciate that." Though he still radiated a certain grimness, something in him had softened, as if a burden had eased. They'd both faced death. They'd both chosen not to give in to hopelessness. Out here, small triumphs felt monumental. That day's work passed in a blur of sweat, hammering, and soft conversation. By dusk, the roof was secure, the cabin snug. Hardin and Lottie shared a modest meal of fresh rabbit stew, savoring each warm spoonful like a feast. When night descended, they each found a corner to rest, a hush settling over the meadows that reminded them of how precarious and precious survival truly was. In the wild frontier, where storms rage and violence comes without warning, mercy can feel like the most reckless gamble. Yet it is that fragile act of sparing a life, or saving a stranger, that forges a path to our own salvation. On this brutal canvas, it is not the fastest gun or the fiercest outlaw who stands victorious. It is the wounded soul who, in compassion, finds the strength to keep hope alive. We all carry our scars, but it is in choosing to rise above them, protecting what's worth loving, defending what's worth building, that we reclaim our humanity, one fragile step at a time. Thank you for listening to Facing Death Alone, one woman's fight for life in the Wild West. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this tale resonated with you, so don't forget to share your reflections below. Your support keeps the fire of storytelling alive. Thank you for being part of our journey.